An educated man in his 60s sits alone in a room. He has just received a terminal diagnosis. He has spent his entire life consulting texts to understand how the world works, but as he looks at his own hands, he realizes that understanding the concept of mortality has done absolutely nothing to prepare him for the physical reality of dying. With only weeks left, he decides on one final intellectual exercise. He transforms his own mind into a courtroom, calling the great philosophers he has studied throughout his life to the witness stand to testify about the end. But this mental tribunal operates under a strict rule. There is no judge. Appeals to God, to human reason, and to the ego are suspended. No one is sitting at the bench to deliver a final, comforting verdict. He isn't conducting this trial to find a cure, and he doesn't expect to be saved. He is using these voices to strip away his own mental defenses and look directly at the absolute limit of human existence. He calls his first witness, the Russian author Leo Tolstoy, drawing heavily on the 1886 novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich. In the story, Ivan Ilyich is a dying magistrate who remembers a logical syllogism he learned as a boy. It goes like this: Caius is a Roman citizen. Men are mortal. Therefore, Caius is mortal. Ilyich realizes this logic is perfectly sound for mankind in general. It makes complete sense for an abstract historical figure like Caius, but it feels entirely false when applied to his own failing body. He is not mankind. He is not Caius. The dying man in our tribunal recognizes this sensation immediately. It is the fissure, a violent psychological rupture that strikes the exact moment abstract theoretical mortality collides with actual personal death. Accepting that everyone dies eventually is a protective mechanism. It keeps the ego safe. When true imminence hits, that comforting general idea that one dies is destroyed by the unavoidable reality that I die. The singular I is now fully exposed, and it is terrified. The dying man asks his tribunal the next logical question: is there a way to master this transition before the biological clock runs out? To answer, he calls upon the 13th century philosopher Ibn Arabi and the Sufi mystic tradition. If that rigid shape represents the isolated ego, Ibn Arabi offers a radical solution: dissolve it now. He captures this in a single maxim: die before you die. This is the practice of fana, the deliberate annihilation of the ego during life. As this timeline shifts, you can see the distinction between a biological secondary death and a spiritual primary death. Instead of waiting for the physical body to fail, the subject undergoes their existential death decades earlier. If you extinguish the illusion of a separate self while you are still breathing, biological death loses its teeth. It shrinks from a terrifying existential catastrophe down to a mere physical technicality. But the everyman hits a wall. This kind of profound spiritual mastery demands a lifetime of continuous, rigorous discipline. He cannot retroactively achieve ego death in a matter of weeks. The attempt to preemptively master death fails the uninitiated mind. The tribunal reaches a deadlock, offering no practical solution for the man actually lying in the bed. He reviews the testimonies. Tolstoy exposed the horror of the I ending. Ibn Arabi demanded the I be dissolved ahead of time. But both arguments share a hidden assumption. They treat death as an experience the subject actively participates in. He calls his final witness the 20th century philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, whose testimony strips away the illusion of experience entirely. Levinas argues that facing death reveals our total incapacity of power. No matter how hard the mind grasps, the event simply passes through. Death is not a project. It is not a possibility we can anticipate, process, or spiritually prepare for. It is the exact point where all human agency evaporates. Levinas calls this absolute alterity. Death is an event arriving from entirely outside the self. It does not engage with our logic, our bargains, or our spiritual readiness. It arrives simply to dismantle the machinery of the subject. Hearing this, the everyman adjourns his internal tribunal. There is no verdict. The philosophical voices have systematically dismantled each other's solutions, leaving him with no master plan, which is exactly where he must be. Finitude is an unthematizable limit. Philosophy cannot solve it. Its ultimate value isn't to save the dying man, but to strip away his intellectual arrogance, leaving his consciousness bare, attentive, and fully exposed to its own end.